Hi, everyone. So before I actually begin the presentation, because we have a few minutes left, this was just kind of to entertain you guys for a little bit. I want to know what all of you think about virtual reality and travel. So if anyone wants to share that, I would love to hear your opinion on that and how it's been used. Or if any of you have used VR before, like what your impressions were of that and what you think that the future of travel with it actually is. Does anyone want to share that? There's one person in the back there.
Good morning. I think virtual reality is sadly mistaken as a tool of marketing, not as a tool of another destination. And it's going to continue for a very long time. And it makes me slightly sad. And I think virtual reality is not a tool for marketing, a virtual goggles that you can put and have a 360 video of a place. I think it's something closer to the Matrix. And I think we can get people buy tickets to disappear into virtual reality for a couple of days. And I am actually doing myself my doctoral thesis on self-constructed virtual reality, a PlayStation 4 that you can plug in yourself to, and it actually constructs, by using big data, a virtual reality you would like to visit, but you can't or cannot yet. But yeah, so for now, it's going to be marketing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's completely true and pretty awesome. What I'm going to talk about is actually a combination of the two things, of how we can have people go travel to new spaces and really do what is essentially teleportation, which is what virtual reality really allows. So it is the way that someone can go spend 2 days in this headset within a space. You could take a whole holiday just by putting on goggles within your living room. But also that this can be used as a very new type of marketing that was much more impactful than we've ever experienced before. And I'll link that in with the presenter who's after me about trying to help travel agents increase their presence and increase bookings through them. So I think we have one more minute. Essentially, VR, in the way that was stated by the speaker before, is really a new way to think about the definition of travel and museums. And so it's what I will get into. Okay, so it seems like the timer has started at the very least, so I'll get into this. So I'm Karen Nemeth of Realities.io. We are a photorealistic documentary company that is also working on computer vision technologies to make it possible to actually go and use these headsets as a type of teleportation. I am a producer here, making the documentaries and funding them, but in addition to this, I'm also working with XRBase. So XRBase is an incubator and a set of co-working spaces for virtual reality and augmented reality content creators in Europe. We already have hubs in Amsterdam and here in Berlin, and we're opening up in a few more cities in the next coming months, actually. So look for us around, and if you're interested in creating any type of VR or AR production, you can come to us and we'll help you make that come true. I'd like to start out with the definition of travel and how this is going to change. So travel up until now is defined, at least by Wikipedia, as the transportation of people around different physical locations in the world. So it's the movement of people, be it in a cab or be it in a ship or in an airplane. This, of course, has been happening for ages. And what travel allowed in the age of exploration, when we started taking ships across continents, was the creation of museums. And so then we started getting this sense of cultural tourism. And how do you access the artifacts from around the world without ever having to go there yourself? This all changed with the airplane and the accessibility to flight, because now people can afford to actually go to those spaces themselves all around the world, right? They can fly, and so we're seeing some issues, say in Barcelona, where they're finally deciding to ban tourism or like cap the number of tourists that are coming into the city, because it's really ruining the local culture itself. And that is impactful to everyone that's living there, right? And to the businesses that are there as well. So using virtual reality can mitigate some of these issues, because in virtual reality, for the first time, we're not transporting people between places. We're transporting the places themselves to the people in that same way that the museum tried to get that idea 150 years ago. For now, you can put on the set, which is like a TV in front of your eyes, essentially, and then the spaces will be brought to you. It is this form, and up until now, there have been two different types. Oh, there are two different types of virtual reality used. So there's 360 video, which is probably what you're most familiar with. 360 video is this notion of using your phone. If you've ever heard of Google Cardboard and use that, or if you've used the Samsung Gear, this is where you put your phone in front of your face, and then it can use these different images. So 360 video is conducted with one camera that's in a fixed position, and then you're just encapsulated by the space. So just cameras taking it all around you. When you're within the experience, you're just sitting there or standing there, and you can look around, but there's almost no movement. If you were to move in this space, like you were in actual reality, you might get very sick. And so you've probably heard some people talk about this. The reason for that is nothing to do with VR or this technology. The reason for that is because your body is expecting to feel certain forces based on its visual input, but it's not receiving those forces because you're not actually, moving yourself. So this screws up your body a tiny bit, and you might feel a bit nauseous. But when we're talking about real virtual reality, which is this room scale experience where you can walk around and the view changes as you're walking around. You can duck and see underneath objects. You can jump up and see them the same way that you would in real life. When we're talking about this, we're talking about a whole new set of immersive technologies that can be present. We talk about really this essence of technological teleportation. This is very difficult to do. And so this goes into the different ecosystems that we see. The ecosystems of 360 video are quite built out in the area of travel. The reason for this is simply because of the cost that goes into it. To do a 360 video, you simply need one 360 camera, ideally a drone. So we're talking about an investment of somewhere between 15 to 20,000 euro, which is quite reasonable for these large companies, and it produces a fantastic return. One of the best companies doing this is called Thomas Cook, and Thomas Cook has been experimenting with the use of 360 videos to do fly-throughs. Say in Paris, they do a fly-through down the Champs-Élysées. They put this in with travel agents, and then the travel agents can show this in order to give the idea of what can be done when you go to these locations. And so through this, they've actually found that virtual reality has increased their bookings by over 290%. It's also been used by some companies, by some airlines, in order to showcase within the travel agents section, like the distance of the seat in front of you so that you can get an upgrade. If you see in economy that the seat in front of you is right here, but then you see that in first class, the seat in front of you is a meter out, you're most likely going to purchase the first class ticket. So they've experienced great success with this. However, for the individual person that's looking to just go and explore a new space, this doesn't really create that type of experience. This is where you get into some problems. Now, in volumetric VR, there are very few companies doing it, and I'll get into the reason why in a second. The companies that are really doing this are mostly SciArc, ourselves, and another company called Realities out of New Zealand. So Masterworks is with SciArc. They're an archaeological preservation company, and they just released Masterworks actually about a few weeks ago now. But most of that technology was actually done by us originally with Realities.io. And Destinations is Steam's example of this that they did a few years ago in how to use these techniques for volumetric travel. But that was also so difficult that they then found us at Realities.io and decided to stop doing their own productions because of the work that we were doing and how we were automating the production of these spaces. So, to go into why this is so difficult, this is because we're using a process called photogrammetry. I am so happy that the man who spoke before mentioned the matrix, because the matrix is actually the first usage of photogrammetry that was done to the mass audience. Photogrammetry is the process of using 2D images in order to create three-dimensional spaces. So this is training the computer to see the same exact way that your eyes do. By taking two different images, we're able to triangulate and come out with those measurements, and then the computer can use that to create a fully navigable 3D environment, the same way that you would think of an open-world video game where you can kind of explore at your own pace in your own style. But with VR, you're doing that by walking rather than with a controller. Now, this gets into extreme difficulty because you only need 2D images to start doing it, which means that you only need one very high quality camera. However, putting all these pictures together is extremely difficult. And it becomes even more difficult when you talk about some objects that have very intricate details, such as plants or such as anything reflective and shiny. Metal, we really can't do that well. Because in order to put all these photos together, we need to hire artists themselves that will go in and manually stitch these. So The Matrix was the first usage of that. That scene where the guy is like bending over backwards to have the bullet go right over his head, that was the first use of photogrammetry in Hollywood. And Hollywood has been using this to create 3D environments so that they can green screen all of their productions. And they spend millions per production on making this happen by hiring 3D artists in India in order to manually do this process. What Realities.io has done in order to bring this at the cost that virtual reality can afford, there isn't too much content investment in virtual reality right now, so we have to bring the cost down, is that we've automated all of this stitching. So all of that manual labor that Hollywood pays millions for, we absolutely do not have to do that. The computer will do it ourselves for us. And this allows us to get into the price point of individual documentaries themselves and how we experiment with the different storytelling in these spaces. So one of our first productions, well, it was a production about a year ago, was in Cologne Cathedral. And so this is an example of how immersive volumetric virtual reality can be used in order to help a place like Barcelona. In Cologne, with the cathedral, it's one of the largest, tallest cathedrals in the world, right? And when you're in this space, in virtual reality, you actually feel that height and that vertical scale because it's a one-to-one experience. You jump in there, you look up, and it feels like you're actually there. This picture is showing you the way on the right-hand, your left-hand side. The blue is kind of the meshes and the way that the computer sees this image. It sees it as this collection of different images and the different points that are part of the textures of it. Photogrammetry works super well with rocks, with stone structures, which is why this cathedral is almost a perfect example. Once you're in this space, we're able to overlay it with any type of interactions that we want. And so that gets into how we turn these spaces into a new form of museum themselves in order to educate people on this. So we're able to use different types. Oh, sorry, I'm bad with this clicker thing. So we're able to have different types of storytelling techniques. And one of the ways to do this is with holograms. So in Star Trek, you might be familiar with the way that they do holograms, and this has been really successful in virtual reality. We're able to take stereoscopic or volumetric video of individuals and put that into the experience so that you can be standing there one-on-one and having a conversation with the expert of the space that you're in. So an example of this would be that in the future, we can teach kids about the history of Rome by sending them to the Vatican, taking videos of the Pope, doing the actual tour of the Vatican itself, and for the first time, you're having a conversation with someone that you otherwise would never be able to speak with, never be able to hear their perspectives, and you're able to hear them within the space itself. And it really takes you out of a textbook and brings you into that space in a way that I can't completely articulate it, and I apologize for that. And that's mostly because of how new this really is. This picture here is a new way also to think about preservation and of that aspect of marketing and how we get people into locations. This picture is from the House. Does anyone know what the House was here in Berlin last year? Okay, cool. There was this abandoned bank of an old Berliner bank in Kudamm, so just a few kilometers from here in the center of Berlin. This bank was 10,000 square meters, and in the 1970s it was abandoned and left open with completely white walls. And they were going to tear it down this past year to turn it into condos. So before they did this, D. Dixons, who are the group who actually curate all of the street art around Berlin. If you go to the factory, you'll see there's a very large mural on the side of the building of a piece of meat being sliced by a knife. or any of the other street art around the city was pretty much done or curated by this group of people. They knew that this building was being demolished, so they went inside and they invited 165 of their friends from all around the world to come and to deck this whole space out in street art. So every square centimeter on the ceiling, behind the toilets, was decked out in artwork. This was open to the public for 2 months. So for 2 months, it was a big tourist attraction, attracting people from all over the world to come into what was a museum of urban art. But then, like what typically happens with art in the street, is it got demolished, and this no longer exists in the real world. So Realities was able to do the preservation tool that we do with photogrammetry, where we went in and we scanned the entire space before it was knocked down. And now this space lives on forever in VR. But it wasn't just that. We are also able to conduct interviews with all of the artists. So now when you go into this space in VR, not only is it an intimate experience with the artwork itself, because if you went in real life, I mean, there were lines that were 7 hours long, so this place was completely crowded. But now you're in there on your own to explore it at your own pace, to really take in the full artwork experience. But you can also speak with the different artists and hear their stories, the inspiration. So in a traditional museum, you'd have the plaque where a bunch of people are standing around and reading this text, but now you're there just talking with the artists themselves and getting that story in a way that's never been told before. This is a great marketing technique, at least in my opinion, because we are inviting people to come into the city in a very personable manner. Now, people that come to Berlin, people from all around the world have heard of Berlin street art. I'm from New York City, and in New York, one of the reasons why I came to Berlin and moved here was because of the creative art scene that's here. But it's so difficult to break through the exterior of the city, in a sense. It's a difficult city to get used to. Once you do, it's the most fabulous place. But in order to break through that barrier, it helps to know the right people. If you use the house and you meet these people as if you were there with real life, you feel welcomed into this community. And now you can go on Facebook, look, oh, these guys were D. Dixons, let me look at what they're up to. They're doing this mural festival in June that's going to completely transform the entire city of Berlin. And I'm going to go to that. So now this is a new marketing technique for the city itself to get people to come, know that they should go to Urban Spree as the best gallery, know that they should go to these mural festivals, and know where to look for that information of how to do it. So it's really this new technique of getting people in. We're able to do this with even more immersion than just having conversations with people. I apologize for the darkness of this slide. One of the ways that we're able to do this is simply because the software that produces these experiences is the same as video game software. This is made in Unity or Unreal. We actually use Unreal for these. And so that means that we can overlay all of our experiences with any type of gaming interaction that you can think of. So the picture here is a shipwreck experience that we're doing, which is why it's so dark. And this is for a museum in Sweden. This was a shipwreck from 1526, if I get that year correctly. Sweden spent 1 year of GDP on a ship that was sank on its second journey out. They were in a war with Denmark, and Denmark tried to capture this ship because 1 year of GDP is worth it to steal from the people that you're at war with. And they accidentally set fire to the fuel storage. The whole thing blew up and it sank underneath the Baltic Sea. So we were able to have some divers go into this shipwreck and film the whole thing in photogrammetry. So now it can be explored and you can swim around this whole shipwreck trying to find the 24-karat gold cannons that are lining the whole ship. And so this is a new technique that we have to teach people about this, about how much money they spent on these different warships, about what the architecture of these ships was like, and how important this was to the individual cultures of that time, but in a gamified manner, right? That's lots of fun. This is going to be a multiplayer experience that will be available as a location-based installation. That's what we call it in VR when you go to what is essentially an arcade. I don't like calling it arcades because people think of video games then, but it's really a special exhibit in a museum where you can go in, pay €20 for 10 minutes in this experience and get to really live it without having to make the investment in a VR headset for your home. And so I think that the most powerful use case for VR in travel is the accessibility to spaces that you would otherwise never be allowed to go to. There are so many spaces around the world that are blocked from public access for structural reasons or for safety reasons, and these are completely removed when we're talking about VR, when you only need a drone and a camera to access these spaces. Right here is a picture of El Mirador, which is a Mayan capital city in the middle of the rainforest in Guatemala. In order to reach El Mirador, you have to hike for 2 to 3 days through the jungle. This is not for the faint of heart, right? Or you have to take a helicopter in, which is what we did to go scan it. This has some problems because of the plants, so this is not a fully realized experience. It is one that we're looking to do in the future. But the wonder of this is that it allows people to see the culture of the Mayan civilization without ever having to step foot there. And the best example for this, I think, is in Cambodia. This is my favorite to use. And we haven't done a scan there, so I'm warning you. This is just the best use case in my opinion, because if you want to use VR in order to prevent people from going to places like Venice or Barcelona or Paris in order to keep the culture of those local cities, we don't want that same effect to happen to remote regions of the world. Cambodia, most of their GDP comes from tourism, and most of that tourism comes from people going to Angkor Wat, right? If we were to film Angkor Wat, then all of a sudden, so many people that might have only gone to Cambodia specifically to see that temple complex think, well, I've already seen it in VR. I know that it's going to be better in real life, but there's no point in spending my money when I can go somewhere that I can't go with virtual reality. And we don't want to harm anyone or anything. We want to promote the entire travel industry. So instead of scanning Angkor Wat, we will go in and scan another temple complex that is in ruins for one reason or another, that it hasn't been upkept over the years. And so in this way, you're allowing people to access a little teaser of what they would get. So now they're in this ruin complex, walking around, understanding what that culture was like and thinking, wow, if this is this incredible, what is that experience like? I want to go have that myself. And so now they're going to book their travel and they're going to make their next trip to the location of interest. So for tourism boards looking for a way to attract people, this is the way to combine both that idea of how we take people to spaces that they've never been before, how we bring that culture that's never been received before to the people, and then also a way to market the locations themselves. So we just have to be very careful about the places that we're scanning, where we're going, and the productions themselves, and the way that we're telling these stories in order to attract people in. We have some other out-of-reach places that are not specifically for tourism. A new production that we're working on right now, which will be released actually in the next coming weeks, is of the last coal mine in Germany, which is closing. Within the next few months, it will be closing for good. Coals is perfect for photogrammetry for this technique. So before they shut this mine, they allowed us to go in and to scan the whole thing. And so we're creating a documentary now on life as a coal miner in Germany and what that was like throughout the years and how coal really changed and affected the whole world because energy resources were a large cause of many of the world wars. So by going into this cave, I wish that I could have brought my headset and this experience so that you all could experience it right now, because you get in there and the moment that you stand up, the cave is about at this height. So since this is a one-to-one scale, you enter it and all of a sudden your first reaction is that you want to duck and get down as quickly as possible because you think that your head is hitting the ceiling when it's actually not. You get to explore this coal mine in a way that you never will be able to. It doesn't promote tourism, but it does promote the idea of the culture of the local region. And so we have many other productions coming out, but in the end, in order to do all of this, Realities is focusing on different computer vision and machine learning breakthroughs that will make this possible. Because when we're talking about these spaces, remember how I said that this is a bunch of 2D images that are all stitched together? Well, this is extremely difficult to render, especially rendering when you're looking at it. Think about when you're loading a Netflix video, right? When Netflix first loads, it's very pixelated until it loads enough of the image that now you have a fine-tuned image, right? What we're doing is Netflix, but everywhere around you. So the amount of computing power that has to go into this is pretty insane. You can't do this on your phone. This is an experience that can only be had on a Vive, an Oculus, a Windows mixed reality headset that is tethered to a very powerful gaming computer, essentially, with some of the best hardware on the market. And even then, it's not in photorealistic quality. As the quality of headsets gets better and better, we're currently at about 4 or 5K textures that we can assume. As those get even more, we need to make sure that all of these images can be rendered in front of your eyes as quickly as possible to make this become a reality. And so realities themselves is actually moving away from this now and focusing solely on this technology so that any content creators and any person can experience this teleportation, essentially, as truthfully as possible. We are part of the incubator XRBase, and XRBase is the network of content creators throughout Europe who are creating these things, and so we do our own production. So if you're interested in getting into these experiences, if you're with a tourism board and you're looking to promote your own country or to just even document and preserve a space that you know of that you really want the rest of the world to travel to, please contact me either at my Realities email or at XRBase. We have some flyers noting what we do out on the table outside of this hall. And we can make this come true for you. And we also do some 360 videos and other things, but I really want to focus on the volumetric because this is really the future of VR and of travel when we have the technology out there. So thank you all. And we have some time for Q&A, I think. So does anyone have any questions? Or does anyone have any cool places that you know of that you would love to share with the world or that you want the world to know about that you don't think that they do? Okay, sounds good. Thank you all.